Live from parts unknown, you're listening to Simon Miller's Pro Wrestling Podcast, the only wrestling podcast on the planet, we think. Sit back, relax, prepare for positivity to run through your veins as Simon Miller gives you your weekly dose of powerful pro wrestling audio. It is Miller Time.
Hello and welcome to Simon Miller's Pro Wrestling Podcast. My name is Simon Miller, and yes, this is indeed a pro wrestling podcast. We are but days away from the Royal Rumble, and that means I'm pumped, you pumped, everybody's pumped, because even if you don't... It brings out all the secret wrestling fans. Everyone pretends they don't like wrestling, and the Royal Rumble starts, and all of a sudden everybody wants to talk about the Royal Rumble. I know how it works. Do go back to the first episode this dropped this week, where we do go through the Royal Rumble match by match. I assume we're going to do that a little bit today, just because that's the nature of the beast. And again, just a tie into what this episode is all about, in case you've never listened to before. Episode 2 of the week is where I reach out to one of my patrons that do indeed support the podcast. The podcast wouldn't exist if it wasn't for patreon.com/Simon316 and lovely people that reach out to help me out, which is why today we get a Patreon on, and I'm pleased to say, at the very last minute, he has helped me out of a right bind. It's my man, Rob. Rob, how you doing today?
I'm doing quite well, aside from the cold. It is 12 degrees Fahrenheit where I'm at, which I believe is about minus 11 degrees.
It is, yeah. And, that's cold. I mean, it's like 0 here, and that's outside. Indoors, it's all right. So you're in a room.
Yeah, it's turns out my new place, my new house, is quite drafty. Didn't know that. Haven't been here long enough to experience that till just about now.
You're going to have to get those draft excluders, man. Those big snakes that you throw at the bottom of doors and stuff. They're weird.
Oh yeah, that'd be brilliant. Yep. That's true.
Well, dude, look, thank you very much for joining me today.
No
I do appreciate it, especially because I think where you are, obviously miles away across the pond, it's like 6:30 in the morning or something ridiculous.
Yeah, it's gonna come 7 about 12 minutes here.
There we go. So look, the Simon Miller Pro Wrestling Podcast rolls on regardless. So look, dude, we had a little bit of a chat before we began, and straight away you were saying things that put a big smile on my face, because as people know, I love doing podcasts like this, because you just never know where they're going to go. And straight away, again, you dropped some stuff in, and I was like, there it is. There's the hook for this week's episode. So, and also, you know, you are, as I'll let you talk about in a minute, somewhat of a... I don't know the right word, but a newbie, I guess I'll call you to the wrestling. Well, there's something in there. You kind of hinted at it, so let's do that. Why did you start watching wrestling? Where are we at now? Give me your pro wrestling history, especially because the most interesting line you gave to me earlier was, I'm hooked on this for life. And I think everybody that watches wrestling kind of knows that feeling. So yeah, give me the lowdown on what brings you here today.
Yeah, sure. I was aware of wrestling during the Attitude Era, because I feel like everyone in America was basically aware of wrestling at that time. They just had a lot of things going for them. I'm not sure in a modern context if that product would hook me like the modern product does as an adult. But as a kid, it was like, oh man, everybody was talking about it at my school and everything like that. And like, I thought it was very interesting, but I was very quickly banned from watching it by my parents.
Understandable.
Because there was kind of a policy in the household that if I wanted to be very interested in watching something on television or doing something, my parents would sort of just check it out to see how they felt about it. And the episode of Raw, I believe it was, I don't remember, I mean, I was a baby, that I chose, this was in elementary school time, to show my parents, because I felt wrestling was just fine, involved the Godfather offering Steven Regal a night with 3 sex workers.
Excellent.
Who proceeded to, display their wares, and... Needless to say, my mother and father were not terribly impressed with the programming.
That's excellent. That is the best story we've had in years. But also, fair play to your parents. Technically, that's just them being good parents. And that's the...
Absolutely. Yeah. And it sort of knocked me out of wrestling, though, because I was already completely hooked into another lifelong fandom of mine, which is the horror genre.
Yeah.
And so my precious hours in the wee hours of the morning when I could sneak and watch things that I wasn't supposed to were all taken up by horror movies. So like I was like, there isn't enough time while my parents are asleep to be a wrestling fan right now, because I need to catch up with Freddie and Jason and all those folks.
Of course, yeah.
So I sort of just fell out of it. I was, of course, very enamored with The Undertaker, though, for that exact reason, right? Like, there's all these people who are wrestlers and they wrestle. and then there's a undead demon cowboy. What? And that was very instantly captivating, to say nothing of how, even now, how strong that entrance is.
Oh, man. Well, I think that's the kind of endearing nature of that character, right? Is that, one, even as, mature adult wrestling fans, we're all happy just to accept, yeah, he's a dead guy. But also, two, it is that entrance, right? No matter how many times you see it in the right setting, or just one of those moments where somehow sort of life takes you, whatever it does, it just surprises you. That entrance is the best one ever, right? And it makes it gives you chills, be it whether you're in the arena or you're just sitting at home on your couch. And that's the kind of thing. And I think it's moments like that when I go, that's why this character works, because they've come up with these ideas and concepts that stand the test of time. It sounds really sad, but I always used to, when people used to ask me about that aren't fans, I always used to compare it to a song that you like. And sometimes you can be listening to that song for the 100th time, and also you're like, oh my gosh, it's making me feel like I've never heard it before. And Undertaker's entrance always does that. Like, it really does. It's fantastic.
It's really one of the top, predictably excellent moments in wrestling, in my opinion. Even though I kind of wish that you would retire at this point, because, well, I mean, we all know why. Crown Jewel was an interesting experience.
Oh man,
watching
I mean, obviously Crown Jewel was controversial anyway, but it's a shame.
Oh well, yeah. Let's not even get into the politics, because I canceled my WWE Network subscription over that.
No, I understand. I totally get it.
I have to watch the the versions of Raw and SmackDown they put up on Hulu, since I have that anyway, and watch pay-per-views with friends or whatever, because I just the dirty money and all that. It's kind of turns the stomach.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing as well, from a purely obviously this is not a big deal at all. I mean, that was a shame because it was a shame. It doesn't need any extra context to be a shame. But the Crown Jewel show itself was so dumb, and it was so ridiculous, and it was so over the top. It was almost like, why did you have to also, shroud this in horrible political controversy? Because I could have enjoyed the hell out of this show otherwise. Because it was basically, it was all that was wrong with WWE. Just spouted out.
They just turned into it. They leaned into it so hard. It was like the last dying gasps of Vince being sure that he knew better than the fans, what the fans wanted. Like almost throwing a tantrum before All Elite came along and changed everything.
Well, yeah, and I like it when they do that. I mean, not all the time, but on a show like Crown Jewel that I couldn't have given two hoots about anyway. Like, if you want to wind up the fans and do all the things that are going to piss people off, do it, man. I was in tears. When Shane McMahon won, I was in actual tears.
I was dying. It was the funniest thing that I've seen in a long, long time, because it's so ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
But back on track, I have a tendency to digress, and you'll find that out over the course of this.
Nothing wrong with that, dude.
So I was out of it for a long, long time, into other stuff, and one of my many hats that I wear now is that I'm a tabletop role-playing game designer.
That is badass, dude. What a thing to be able to say that you do. That is a cool job.
Yeah. I'm actually planning on putting my first gigantic, way too much work, don't design a game this complicated first, it's a stupid idea game out there on Kickstarter sometime this year. It's called the Orpheus Protocol.
Nice, man.
And that's actually, the beta test of that is like a long-running campaign. That's the podcast that I run, the Orpheus Protocol podcast. But
there you go. Everyone go check it out. Right there. Everyone go check it out.
As it turns out, a enormous overlap between people who like D&D and other tabletop role-playing games and people who like wrestling. And so tabletop Twitter was just going nuts in 2018 over the Royal Rumble. And I was like, you know what? Enough of my friends are talking about this. I'm going to give it a look. I'm just going to, on a whim, I was like, I'm going to check this out. And, as we all know, Royal Rumble 2018, especially without the benefit of seeing where some of that stuff went afterwards, it was just incredible. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh boy, this is, sometimes you can just tell, like, okay, this is an art form that I am just completely resonant with. Like, I'm going to watch wrestling just a lot now for all time.
So good. So good, dude.
It's such an impressive method of delivering a narrative. And, like, the added superhuman athletic performance and display gives it a feeling that a lot of other forms of entertainment don't have, and it's one of the last truly live things on TV, although, they do cheat a little bit here and there.
But I always think that as well. I think the one thing that, again, because I've been watching it so long, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, you forget that it's live, right? Like when we talked about entrances with The Undertaker, where else do you get that? Where somebody's entrance music will hit, you'll have a dedicated entrance. It's always a bit like boxing, but it's not at the same time, because I'll throw MMA, UFC in there as well. When I watch boxing or MMA, which I do love, I'm always like, man, these entrances are crap. Because they are. They don't have the big production values. They're not over the top. And that's kind of when you take a step back. And I always thought of it like from The Rock's point of view, like, or even John Cena now, sort of more to the point. But they always said, like, oh, you never get this kind of entertainment anywhere else, and I'm always going to come back. And I always thought, yeah, I can see why. Because I'm sure being an actor is great, and that comes with its own perks. But you never get that, that kind of raw reaction. I mean, Stone Cold Steve Austin's Glass Break is the best example of that, where something happens.
It's so good.
Yeah, and you get that proper instinctual, again, reaction from someone that's not even thinking about what they're doing. It's almost like Pavlovian conditioning. You're just reacting to this thing because deep down inside of you, that's what you've been trained to do.
Probably is exactly Pavlovian conditioning.
It is, yeah. But it's fantastic. And that is why, when people say to me, why do you watch wrestling? I'm like, because like you just said, nobody else tells story like this. And sure, a lot of their stories are crap, but a lot of them are really good too. But also, it has this vibe, and it happens within this environment that is utterly unique, where really, as long as everybody involved is happy to do it, you can do whatever you want. Like there are no rules in pro wrestling. The book is open, and that's why it's so fascinating. And you do forget that the more you watch, you just get used to it. But when you take a step back and remind yourself, like, this is what a crazy form of entertainment you can just tune into a few times a week.
I mean, if you look at something like The New Day and then something like The Undertaker and consider that those are all characters on the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that blend of genres, that absolute bedlam, that chaos of tone, really, the only place I could think that you get something like that would be Bollywood films.
Yeah, no, you know what? That is I mean, I've only seen a few, but that is such a good comparison because, again, they
you just do whatever genre makes sense for this scene.
Yeah, exactly. They go by their own rules. They're not confined by. And yeah, sure, the argument is WWE has fallen into a pattern. Okay, they've fallen into the WWE pattern, but like you said, you still do get, again, the New Day coming out, and then you'll get a guy posing in a mirror, and then and then there's a dude that's pretending to be dead. It's just like, what is this? I don't think there's any explanation for it, which is probably why, like you said yourself, some people will react and love it straight away, and other people will never be able to understand, because I do think it's that divisive. I just think it either clicks with you or it doesn't. But that is brilliant, dude.
I would tend to agree. Yeah, so I got into it so hard after that Royal Rumble. I've watched every Raw and SmackDown. Some of those Raws were a mistake, but watched every Raw and SmackDown and every NXT since then. And I've also gotten into New Japan, which I actually think is a better product, probably on the balance. Perhaps not than NXT, but certainly over the other two shows.
Yeah, I think the thing with New Japan is that, again, I think the older you get, the more it's harder to suspend your disbelief, and I think New Japan does such a good job of doing that by presenting it as a sport. I mean, it's as simple as that. But I always come back to the fact that, as I do, I'm a New Japan convert now. I was always on the cusp, and then it's kind of the big boom over the last few years just wrapped me in. But I think the reason I love it so much is because I always know I can go back to my crazy WWE world, and that's why that's why I never want it to change. I think my love for New Japan is heightened because of my love for WWE.
Yeah, and like I appreciate the cartoonishness of a lot of the stuff in WWE, and I appreciate sort of the more gritty, straight down the middle presentation of some of the more sport-like elements in New Japan. I think ultimately what sort of wins it for New Japan for me is just that the storylines all make sense.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Like Vince McMahon revolutionized the industry. Like his sort of understanding of promotion and camera techniques and production and things like that. I mean, without that, wrestling would be like a little rinky-dink regional thing like it was for, roughly hundreds and hundreds of years before, for sure. But like, speaking as, a creative, that's how I butter my bread. I don't think Vince is a good writer. I don't think he has a good grasp of storytelling at all.
Interesting, dude.
And, the things that are annoying about WWE here and there have all the classic earmarks of like a movie or a television show that suffered from excessive executive meddling, where someone who's cutting a check gets to just get the final shot on everything, even though they don't really know the craft, narratively speaking. And it feels very much like that when you get some of these insane things that make no sense, and like, oh, we're building up, the breaking of the Shield, right? Like this unbreakable brotherhood that somehow broke and survived and came back together. And so we've got this villain who is the one who, even after knowing how painful that sundering was for all involved, is going to betray his brother on the night that his other brother announces that he has fucking leukemia, right? Yeah. We build that up. And then a couple weeks later, Vince rewrites 3 episodes in a row. And by the end of it, Dean Ambrose character is dead on arrival.
Yeah.
And like no anticipation, no more intrigue, no emotional authenticity. He's like, oh, I don't like germs, and he gets a shot in his butt. Like, that is not something that would happen if someone was writing with an eye to making a good story who at least had good instincts in that direction. I think that when you've got one person who has final say on literally every aspect of a project the size of WWE, that's too much work to get right, even if you're the best person in the world at doing like everything.
I think the real
and I think that the story is really where it wears thin sometimes.
Absolutely. And the real issue with the Dean Ambrose thing is that if someone comes up to me right now and catches up on the story and says, Simon, why did Dean Ambrose start to hate Roman Reigns? I go, I don't know, man. Like, I have no answer for you. I wasn't told. It's the same reason, why did Big Show come back for a month and team with The Bar and punch the New Day in the face? I have absolutely no idea. I was just never told. Going back to the Vince McMahon thing quickly, because I think that was quite an interesting point of view. Do you think he's ever had that skill? Because obviously the stereotypical Vince McMahon argument is, back in his pomp and his heyday, he was great and he had his finger on the pulse of the demographic everybody wanted. But as he's got older, his mind has slipped, as it does for everybody, and now he can't do it anymore. Do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily age. I was thinking about that because he's been featured on the product a lot more recently.
Yes,
and I felt that for a man his age, he seems remarkably sharp.
Incredible. For a 72-year-old dude.
And reactive. Yeah. Like, he's acting up there. Like, he's reacting to what the wrestlers are saying and doing all these facial expressions and, like, not messing up his lines. Even if some of the stuff he's saying is fantastically weird. About David getting high on mushrooms.
Honestly, like
getting reincarnated as Finn Balor. Amazing.
The whole David and Goliath story, as told by Vince McMahon, it didn't really hit me.
I thought it was funny.
How weird it was until like yesterday.
But it was absolutely bizarre.
It was. What was he talking about? Like, what was he talking about? I have no idea. I should have. I thought once Ups and Downs was in the can, and I got on with my dad. I was like, Simon, you really should have focused on that David and Goliath story more.
But it was truly strange.
It was.
I mean, he was being the heel, right? Like, he was displaying in his character that he is so at the top of the mountain and so a figure of authority and stuff that like he literally can't even imagine a world where David beats Goliath. So he just assumes that the story is that of course Goliath kicks David's ass.
That was great
because Goliath is huge, right? And like huge men always win.
And don't forget that the week before that, he had Finn Balor in a ring full of big men, and he went, "Look at all this man meat, this beef." I was like,
"Yeah, look at all this beef."
It's like he doesn't. It kind of goes back to the whole crown jewel thing. It's almost like he doesn't care. He's like, look, this is what I think. I believe, and he's right. I've had tremendous success. I think big guys are great. So, go fuck yourself. That was essentially what he was saying.
That really was the promo, wasn't it? And I think it's less age because I feel like he has a lot of his acumen still. I don't think he's slipped in a very noticeable way. I think it's more like, and you see this in any art form, there are kind of workhorses who, novelists who write 50 novels, filmmakers who make 50 films, etc. in their careers. And then there are people who have like one untouchable hit and they can't step out of the shadow of it. They get too attached to it. They can't overcome the legacy of the thing that they made.
Yeah.
Like Harper Lee wrote 2 books and didn't want the first one published ever.
That's
like
true,
it's
yeah.
To Kill a Mockingbird, and then they like elder abused her and like put out the other book even though she didn't want it. And I feel like that's Vince McMahon. he had one untouchable hit in like the underdog Superman story with Hulk Hogan, and like he just doesn't have the juice to like try all the different other ways of telling stories. Is sort of just, I mean, that's of course just my opinion. Like I could be totally wrong, but that's the impression that I get from like looking at matches from back in the day versus matches now and things like that.
But I think it's really interesting though, man, because you are coming at it from it kind of is an interesting or a unique perspective, because obviously the big problem WWE has had over the last 5 or so years is getting new people to view. You are the counterpoint to that. You've joined over the last 12 months. You've said yourself you're a fan for life. So, you know, technically, when you just sort of get on that wave, most people would be, I would say they'd be quite high on it, but they wouldn't be sort of dissecting it as well as you have done. Because I also think, again, you can go back to the Attitude Era, and I always say this, and everyone always goes crazy. And of course, I love the Attitude Era. I was, you know, a young teenager. You know, things were happening that, again, as you pointed out earlier, that should not have been happening for a child to be able to see. I got banned from it as well. I think probably a lot of people did. But actually, if you go back now with a more mature or adult head, whatever you want to call it, a lot of the stories that were being told, they weren't necessarily great, other than everything between McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Like a lot of that, again, the one I always talk about is the story with Kai and Ty and Val Venus was a bunch of Japanese dude wanted to chop off the porn star's penis. That was the story. And
that was the story. I mean, they made a lot of headlines and got a lot of eyes on the product by being edgy and risque, you know? And like that's a fun trick, but you need some substance behind it if you're going to like keep it going. And I do think that sort of like created a bubble that inflated to its natural conclusion.
Yeah, and look, shock TV worked, especially in the late 90s, like Jerry Springer and reality TV. So if anything, everybody at WWE was very astute. They realized
that was the cultural moment for sure.
Yeah. And they jumped on it. And of course, that's going to bring with it its own controversies, which it did. We all remember everything with the Parents Teachers Council and advertisers pulling out. Like it did. It caused a lot of problems. However, it didn't matter. It's almost like that thing, you know, if you've got a YouTube channel that has millions of subscribers, we've seen this all the time as well. And,
my God, you can just be whatever kind of knob you want to be.
Yeah, exactly, because you've got the numbers and people always come back. I'm not saying that's a positive. I'm saying that's unfortunately sometimes how the world works.
Just true.
And that's what WWE did in the late 90s. They were managed to ride all these controversial waves. I mean, I was watching, I think it was Royal Rumble 2000 the other day for a video I was going to do. I totally forgot they just had Mae Young take her top off. Like, and
of course they did. Why wouldn't they?
And she was wearing, I believe, I'm 99% sure, she was wearing a prosthetic, but that's not the point. Because it's not about what you do, it's the image that you want to put out there. It's the context that you're creating. And I was just
I mean, you're certainly sending a message about women.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I was just like...
And like, honestly, that's the thing. Like, if I went back in time, I couldn't watch, you know, the Attitude Era, because like what they're doing in women's wrestling now has sort of just now become acceptable to me. You know what I mean? Well,
I mean, back then, like I always say that if everybody's on board and that's what they want to do, it's not for me to criticize. But at the same time, if you want to take a step back, look at it for what it was.
I'll go ahead and criticize for you, Simon, because when you put messages out there like that about 51% of the globe's population, people are going to listen to you.
Oh, I totally
bad.
do. No, dude, I agree with you. Don't get me wrong. I went back through all the Attitude Era Raws a couple of years ago, and I could not believe some of the things that they did. It was unbelievable. However, you know, they captured magic. They captured magic in a bottle, and really have been chasing that. Have been chasing that ever since. So, my other question to you, just quite an interesting topic. What is, if you've kind of got to the conclusion that maybe Vince McMahon isn't the great storyteller that a lot of people think he may be, what is it now that's kind of keeping you invested? Because,
absolutely.
But a lot of people say that they can, it's almost like when you watch a video. If you've got bad visual, but the audio is good, everybody's happy. And with wrestling, a lot of people say, I don't actually mind if the matches are a bit crappy, as long as the storytelling is good and I have something to buy into.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things, honestly. One is just the potential of the medium. As I said, like, this is a unique platform for delivering a narrative that has this excellent live athletic component. There's really nothing else like it, and it just hits really hard for me. I think it's amazing. And so because of that super high potential, every time they do hit something really good, it's like worth it. It's worth the slog through this week's 25 minutes of Baron Corbin talking, which I'm so glad is over. Not that it was his fault at all, but but like the good parts were worth going through the bad parts for me pretty much immediately, and sort of out of respect for the wrestlers and all the production team and stuff that are just putting in insanely great work all the time. I can sort of forgive the story. I mean, I will dissect it because I also write like my first movie is actually coming out this year.
Dude, that's badass, man.
That I wrote. Yeah. I guess not an unnatural segue to that. The Nightmare Gallery is a movie coming out this year, hopefully to some big streaming services as well as some on-demand stuff. It stars Amber Benson, who played Tara in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Dude,
it was very fun meeting her and working with her.
Did you direct it or did you write it? What did you do?
I wrote it.
Dude, this is
a
amazing.
Friend of mine directed it though. So it was a very small, very like team camaraderie. Like, let's all spend all of our money on this kind of.
Dude, that's what life's all about, man. When that comes out, you've got to let me know. I will watch it and I will review that. I will absolutely review it. That's
fantastic.
No, dude, that's cool, man. Anything like that is badass. People grabbing, hold of their dream. I love it. I'm all about that crap. Everyone knows it. It's excellent.
For sure. And so, I just kind of naturally, between that and the English degree, like I can't have any innocence watching a story of any kind. I have to take it apart.
Of course
and,
you do.
And look at how it works.
It's your job, basically.
And, frankly, in WWE, a lot of times the story kind of doesn't work these days. But, when it does, it's fantastic. And I feel like there's a lot of cynicism about this, like, new era, we're going to listen to the fans stuff. But I've seen a huge improvement since they announced that in the product. Like, so much more of what's going on makes sense. So much more of it feels like the wrestlers are really having an active input into what they're doing and being able to, like, really portray themselves more so than before. So I'm pretty happy about how things are going right now.
I think as well. I mean, I don't know. This is just me purely speculating, but I think the best thing about All Elite Wrestling that no one, aside from the fact it creates competition and it creates a financial war, which is good because everybody wants to make money. I think it is going to allow wrestlers in the WWE that aren't necessarily getting their pushes, not only to get pushes on TV, but also be a lot more intense, not intense, but a lot louder backstage about what they want to do with their own character. So if Finn Balor has an idea, I imagine now, given what the environment is, he's going to feel far more confident to go to the writers of Vince McMahon and say, no, do this with me. I promise that it will work because of X, Y, and Z. Whereas, again, even a year ago, they always used to get reported all over the internet. Everybody was too scared to say anything just in case they get buried or released. There's
so many things like that. Finn Balor's finally getting pushed instead of being like the most criminally underused person who's not named Sasha or Bailey. And like Mustafa Ali wouldn't be on the main roster before this pressure to like get a more in line with fans type of a product. Vince McMahon wouldn't care about him.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of good things are coming out of this. Although I dread having a third type of wrestling that I have to somehow find time to watch. But so many people that I was really attached to in New Japan are going to All Elite. There's just, unless all of them go there and they don't get a deal where they work together with New Japan, I'm stuck watching three brands and I'm just screwed. Simon, I'm screwed.
Well, that's it, because everyone, obviously, when it all blew out, was like, oh, the Monday Night Wars are back. I'm like, if only. This ain't the Monday Night Wars. You've got WWE. You've got, again, Ring of Honor. You've got New Japan. You've got All Elite Wrestling. You've got Progress. You've got MLW. I could go on and on and on. Like, it is a completely different world. And again, if WCW was about to go out of business today, it wouldn't. Because they just do what Impact did, in the sense they go on Twitch or they'd use social media or they'd find a deal here or there. Like, there's no way.
I agree.
Yeah, but that's why I get excited about it. And yeah, I get it. We shouldn't get ahead of ourselves because you never know. You're 100% right. It could just tick along for 3 years, never really, get the audience that it wants. And before we know, it's 2025 and WWE renews its TV deal. And oh look, the status quo is exactly the same. But I'm just happy that the seed is there. The seed is there for change.
Oh, absolutely. It could be huge. It could be super huge. And like, even if it's not. First off, I support people going after their dreams the way that Cody and the Young Bucks are.
Absolutely.
Like, full stop. anyway. But even if they never really get any success off of this, which I find highly unlikely, if you look at Raw after 2018's WrestleMania versus Raw after All Elite Wrestling got announced, I mean...
Oh, night and day. Oh, there's no...
It's already worth having happened. You know, it's already earned its spot, in my opinion, even if they never put on a single TV show, even if they're lying about their TV deal.
You're right,
I'm
dude.
still glad they said, I'm still glad they've done as they've done. And obviously the TV deal must be real, because why did Chris Jericho sign that?
I think that was the big thing. And don't get me wrong, Chris Jericho will be the first person to tell you. But Chris Jericho is 100% right. Him signing that deal... I had friends of mine that are very peripheral wrestling fans going, dude, what? What the hell is this? Because that's what he does. People will keep an eye on Chris Jericho because he has built up the time and the legacy and the experience to where people give a crap what he does. And they really needed people like that. And again, someone like Chris Jericho, who seems to just have his head screwed on in 100% the right way. Like, I doubt he's going to go in there and be the first champion, or even if he did, there'd be a reason for it. I think he'll play ball. And that's why I think AEW is so exciting, because, you saw on Being the Elite. I don't watch Being the Elite every week, but I try and keep up when I can. The Young Bucks and Cody Rhodes are already joking about the fact that they're all executive vice president. And as long as they keep getting on like that, and as long as their main goal is for it to be a success, then I do think it will be a success. And being a success doesn't mean taking out WWE. That's the last thing that I want. I want everybody to flourish, because as we've already seen, like you said,
absolutely,
it helps. And in 2019, of course, there's been a few things that I haven't necessarily think were good, but I have found Raw and SmackDown to be far more watchable than they have been in a very long time.
And far closer to each other in quality. Like, because I felt like SmackDown never really dipped quite as awfully low as Raw did during the era of, basically, gosh, like once WrestleMania was over, and particularly after Roman left. Like when you've got Baron Corbin running the show, kayfabe, and the same 3 matches every week with just an incredible amount of the same exact talking points being talked every week.
Oh, yeah.
My God. It was, on the 1.5 hour version that they put up on Hulu, it was too damn long.
I can imagine, yeah.
And like, that's crazy. You've got 3 hours to fill, and the best group of, like, at least the most exceptionally enormous group of top tier talent that's ever existed on the planet. To me, my best, rendition of WWE, at least before this change happened, it's like, imagine you've got the best group of visual effects artists and production team, and even some really good writers, and all the best actors in the world that have signed a contract to work on these projects, but the only person who's allowed to do the final, like, executive production is Tommy Wiseau, and he's the one writing it. Like, that's what WWE at its worst is like to me. And like, anything to get us out of that slump is fantastic, and I have to give a lot of credit to All Elite. There's no way that's a coincidence.
No, I think you're right. And again, the fact that we know the revival went, well, apparently, who knows what stories are true, but let's just say it is for the sake of this conversation. The fact we know that, or we assume we know, that the revival went up to Vince McMahon after their Raw match a couple of weeks ago and said, look, man, we want to leave. That
yeah, we want to be out of here.
That is All Elite Wrestling. And New Japan and Ring of Honor. However, All Elite Wrestling has certainly triggered that harder. But I think that's great.
Well, and Andrade Cien Almas did something that would have got him fired or buried at any time during the last 30 years in WWE, WWF.
Told his mates not to
and
come.
And instead is getting permission to put on the best TV matches you've ever seen.
Honestly, man, that Rey Mysterio
And there's no way
match.
that's not All Elite Wrestling.
No, it is.
Both of these matches between those two were just absolutely class. And like, you almost never see something that good outside of a pay-per-view, and it blows me away. Like, the match so nice they did it 2 weeks in a row, and I actually just didn't even care.
Yeah.
I was happy to see it.
No, honestly, I'm the same, and I think the really cool thing about that is, again, the argument that I always see online, it's a fair point to make, is that WWE has a style, they don't deviate from the style, and that makes every match blur into one. Well, that was not WWE style. I mean,
Hell no.
the point where Rey Mysterio glided over the top of Andrade and power bombed him into the apron, I was like, I've never seen that in my life.
Yeah, my wife and I both like gasped watching that. It was just incredible.
That was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant.
They have insane in-ring chemistry. They're both top flight talents, and they're getting featured. even though they're not like the face of the company or whatever. I mean, we've been going without one for a while, actually. But
Well, it has been a while now. Yeah, I mean, the last one was John Cena, really, and he started going off the boil, I guess, 2015, a couple of years, we can say.
Yeah,
So-
I'll trust you on that. I wasn't watching it at the time.
Well, actually,
but,
that's interesting. Though. So, I mean, a quick tangent, but what do you think of? We'll use Roman Reigns. I mean, again, it's that classic out of sight, out of mind. Obviously, all the best wishes with Roman Reigns, but the conversation has died down because, of course, it would do. He's not on Raw or SmackDown anymore.
Sure.
You kind of came to a very strange time where he peaked, and then all of a sudden he was gone.
He's gone.
Yeah. So, what do you take from all that?
I'm given to understand from the internet that I'm a bad wrestling fan because I don't hate Roman Reigns.
Dude, I don't either. I like him. I like him a lot.
I don't get it. You're not like, okay, he's got the look, right? He's massive and one of the most handsome men that has ever been born to this planet, right? And like, he's a good worker. He doesn't forget his lines.
Good with the media.
Yeah, like what's the problem? I mean, if you think the Superman punch is too unrealistic, I'd like to introduce you to a fellow by the name of Mr. Undertaker. So that doesn't, like, the realism thing doesn't really, I don't get it with that.
But my problem with that
like,
is
the booking has been bad sometimes, but like that doesn't make you someone who should hate Roman Reigns. It makes you someone who should be upset with the booking, which is true of almost every wrestler from some time to some time in their career.
Exactly.
Because the booking is not consistent in WWE, straight up. Like, you get someone on the level of Finn Balor being used the way he's been used until very recently. Like, do you get mad at Finn Balor? I don't think you do. I think you get mad at whoever's making the matches and writing the stories.
That was the thing, right? Roman became almost like the surrogate for everybody backstage, which was the most bizarre thing ever. And my whole point with the Superman punch is I would always be like, you know what? I don't particularly like the Superman, move, for whatever reason, but it's certainly not because of it being unrealistic. Because if we're going to go down that route, let's talk.
That's a dangerous road to go down.
But let's talk about a body slam. That only works if the other person lets you do it. Like, you cannot do it unless someone goes, like, I'm going to do it.
Every top rope spot ever.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Like, they have to make sure that neither of them die.
So I never understood
and at that
that.
point, it's like you're complaining that, like, you're watching. I don't know, you're watching like the new Spider-Man movie, coming out later on, and you're like, oh, you know what? You lean over your friend. This is stupid because Tom Holland isn't really a superhero.
I never understand that argument. Like, I get the argument of, you know what, for a signature move, we could come up with something better. Too true. But
you know what? It's safe. He's going to be able to do that when he's 50.
Well, that's the other thing. And also, kids love it. Kids love it.
Yeah,
I've seen kids react to that.
That's part of the demographic for sure.
Yeah, I've seen kids react to that, and they think it's the greatest thing they've ever seen in their life. So
yeah, I don't have the energy in me to hate on Roman Reigns. Like, sure, people get annoying pushes like Charlotte gets put in the front of the line when it doesn't make any sense all the time. But like, you don't see people react the same way. I do think that it almost became a meme, right? Like, if you're a wrestling fan. If you're a smart wrestling fan, you hate Roman Reigns. That seems like the culture, at least online. And I've got no time of day for that.
Well, I don't either, because I'd always much rather, as we're doing now, I'd always much rather discuss the product for what it is rather than what it's not. So I think it's much more fun to say, okay, Roman's the guy. What would we like to see him do? Or how could we shift him here? And especially because he has had good matches with everyone. I always go back to when he had that match with Daniel Bryan. I think it was Fastlane. It was just so good. And from that moment on, I was always like, I'm not sure what I meant. What I meant to hate. And also, who else is there right now that would fill that spot? Yeah, Finn Balor was a shout, and people.
Also, speaking of Finn Balor, Roman Reigns had a title defense against Finn Balor after picking up the Universal belt, and it was a great match.
Yeah, it exactly was. It was. So, but I was just intrigued because obviously, just as I assume you learn about Roman Reigns, obviously we get the horrific news that he's got to go away and get better.
That was some heavy shit. bordering on emotional manipulation when they get the, all the sick kids saying, "You've got this, Roman." They're like, we're sitting here on the couch watching it at home. It's like, I'm not crying, you're crying.
It was awful. It was one of those things where I woke up in the morning and I checked Twitter, as we're wont to do in 2019 or 18. And yeah, that that was the headline on one of the moments, and I was just like, "What? Like, that's not a thing." And then I worried it was a storyline, then quickly realised that it wasn't. It was so hard to process. It was just one of those things where it makes you feel sick in your stomach, even though I don't know Roman Reigns, but he is a part of your week-to-week life because you tune into Raw. So yeah, very.
And you can see it online. There's a lot of people who have said some really hideous stuff about that man over the years, who had to really look at their behavior in the cold light of day after that announcement came out.
Oh yeah, I mean, and again, the thing that always got me, and again, I got a lot of heat for this at the time, but I say like, heat. Who do I think I am? I love hate for this at the time, but like I'm a wrestler.
Well, you are.
Well, yeah, technically I am. Yeah, it's true. But I remember saying, like, I don't like all of these things where people say, well, I don't like the character Roman Reigns, but what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Just send your well wishes to a guy that could probably do with some well wishes right now.
The character has nothing to do. Like, really?
Yeah, who cares? I don't care if you like Roman Reigns or not.
That was way off message.
Irrelevant. But I was just intrigued. So obviously, you mentioned the Undertaker. You mentioned people like that. Outside of that, with the sort of the regular guys, who are the people who kept you hooked? Aside from the product and the way that it's...
Okay, yeah, sure. Who are my favorite wrestlers?
Yeah, exactly.
Currently, right now, I mean, the cheeky answer is Kenny Omega, Kota Ibushi, and Kazuchika Okada. But within WWE, there's a few real big standouts for me, Seth Rollins being one of them. I think that it can't really be overstated. He's a babyface who people like.
No, it's true. It's true,
like,
yeah.
That's so hard to do. Like, it fails so often. And he doesn't come across as a nerd. He doesn't come across as a geek being a babyface. He has a bit of an edge to him, a bit of a like chaotic, a little bit of a crazy energy to him that keeps him interesting to me. Puts on really great matches. He can pull a good match out of basically anybody.
Yeah.
I also right up there with my very big favorites right now is Daniel Bryan.
Oh man, he is.
And interestingly, I mean, I knew that it was a big deal for him coming back, but because of when I started watching, you'd think it wouldn't have hit me. But man, that "Fight for Your Dreams" and "Your Dreams Will Fight for You" promo like had me just broken. Regardless, and like you could tell when he started really firing up and bringing the fight to Sammy and Kevin that first day he was back, like that was something special. And it's really sad how quickly they threw that in the toilet with Big Cass, and then somehow messing up the feud with The Miz, which is surprising because like everyone wanted that. And then here's the new Daniel Bryan doing some of the most brilliant character work I've seen. Despite how little I've actually watched, it's a cut above, and just everything he does turns to gold now with that microphone, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and he's amazing in the ring. He is like a world class talent and has been for a while.
Absolutely, I think he's able to do that thing as well, where everything he's saying, you would be hard to argue it. But but the way he's saying
he's a heel because he's saying true things in a really rude, obnoxious way.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like that's actually Daniel Bryan being a little cheeky, because I think he figured this is how I can get these true facts about the planet and ecology and things like that matter a lot to me out there on national television. I will be allowed to say all these things if it's in the context of me being an asshole.
Exactly.
But then it's still out there. I feel like that's something that he's probably thought through quite a bit.
Yeah, I think so too. And the way that he went after Vince McMahon on Raw talking about the baby boomers, I think he believed every single damn word that he said.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I like many things he says, a cursory knowledge of economics and politics and history would more or less agree with them in broad terms.
Oh, absolutely. It was his social media stuff that got me, how that's the modern day currency and no one cares. I was like, Daniel Bryan, You wonderful human being. It's almost a shame we live in this era where you can't actually be a proper heel because we do all know that it's showmanship and whatnot. But yeah, everything he was saying, it was just, oh man, Daniel Bryan right now. Again, if I had told you, a few years ago that he was going to come back and he would have turned heel within 6 months, people are like, there's just no way.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, they had the most natural, like, heartwarming babyface comeback story ever, and they just fumbled.
But they do that a lot.
They just face planted on that. But, like, all credit to Daniel Bryan. He rescued his own character and his own career.
Oh, massively.
By just being brilliant.
So go on, man, you go.
No, I was going to go on from Daniel Bryan, so if you have something else about
I was just going to say that WWE managed to do this a lot. If you give them a story that's too obvious, it's like they don't know what to do. You mentioned The Miz and Daniel Bryan too. That was already written. But there's two other ones that always get me. When Bret Hart came back in 2010, 11, whenever the hell it was, we didn't need any extra bells or whistles. That story was written, but we had to do it anyway. We had to introduce things in the story despite having a story. And obviously the biggest one would be when WCW was bought out. We had the invasion angle, and we couldn't just stick to what everybody wanted. We had to muddy the waters and I know there was other factors to that. But it sometimes feels like WWE's better when they're fighting, from the corner. If you hand them something on a plate, it's like, I don't know.
Simon, it's what I said. It's executive meddling.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
It's someone with too much creative control and not enough people who are able to safely give them honest feedback without being in fear of losing their jobs, getting out of touch, and believing that they can do no wrong. It happens in every art form that involves investment of significant money.
You're not wrong, man. It's hard to argue.
And here's the evidence. When you get pressure on someone in that position, they start performing better when they're not comfortable.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the era that we're in right now. I have a seat here. We'll put on our tinfoil hats for a second here.
Do it.
This is my little pet theory, right? Vince rewrote those 3 episodes in a row of Raw that were just absolute trash. And I feel like they do this new push to change things with All Elite, breathing down their necks, at least in their minds. We don't know how big it's going to be yet, but like it's something worth paying attention to. I feel like there is a hero backstage at WWE and creative who convinced Vince McMahon that the show needs the Vince McMahon character on camera because he's a huge draw and he makes the stories better by being there, blah, 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 and that gives him less time to fuck up the story. And, like, honestly, the more Vince McMahon has been on the TV screen, the less he's been, putting his brand of interference in all the different storylines.
This is brilliant. That's brilliant. That is
and
brilliant.
He doesn't have time. He doesn't have time to get, like, he's sitting back there fretting, not sleeping, and then, like, I can't stand it. I don't trust these writers. I don't trust this product. I'm going to rewrite the whole thing. We saw what happened. But now he's busy, being Mephistopheles, trying to corrupt AJ Styles' soul, and telling these insane stories about David and Goliath and stuff. And I feel that that's a much better situation than somebody, getting a wild hair and just rewriting episodes the last minute.
Well, dude, I think there is something in that. Like, I'm not big on conspiracies, but when one makes sense, I'll always put my hands up and go, it's not the worst idea in the world.
I'm saying that could have happened. It would fall pretty much in line with what we've seen.
It's true. And I think as well, the best thing about having him back on TV, and this will wear off, and you could probably argue that maybe that's happening, I do get a kick out of seeing him interact with all these people. Like, usually,
for sure.
That start on Raw where it was just Brock Lesnar and Finn Balor and Braun Strowman, McMahon being there made it far more intriguing and interesting to me because I was like, well, I haven't seen this in ages. I've never seen him interact with Finn Balor in this way and actually look him in the eye and say, dude, you too small for me, man. I got a real kick out of that, and it made what, 6 months or something, that 2 months ago would have been a very standard and stereotypical start to Raw. It made it interesting, and it made me enjoy it more. So in that sense...
Well, and like he's the boss both in the story and in real life, and you get this sense of stakes.
Yeah, you do.
He's involved.
Exactly, because that he actually has legit power too. It's not like Baron Corbin that felt like a prop. It's Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon has 25 years plus worth of stock and experience. And
the character too. Like Vince McMahon is not like a wheedling, conniving, weak, cowardly little guy. Like, he's a mean son of a bitch, and he'll ruin you.
It's true. Well, we're seeing that too because something that I thought was a little bit weird was, on Raw, clearly a bad guy, but then on SmackDown, no one say he's a good guy, but he was certainly had, more leanings that way, given that he was yelling at Daniel Bryan. That was a bit strange, but I get, as you say, he can get away with it because he's Vince McMahon, and that may be
absolutely.
good, that may be bad, but hey, that's just the situation we find ourselves in, and it's not going to change.
For sure.
And I do like seeing him back on TV, for now at least. I'm not saying that can't change, but I get a kick when... especially when he was involved with Kurt Hawkins of all people on Raw. I liked that. I was like, okay, I'm not against this.
When I first started watching wrestling, something that I discussed with some friends of mine who watch wrestling was how cool would it be? How freaking cool would it be if there was a character who either by starting out as a referee or becoming a guest referee just actually enforced every single rule? Like, depending on who was in the match, you could make that, like, the ultimate babyface or the ultimate heel. Is this referee who actually does his damn job? And, like, I got to see that on TV.
Well, none of the other ones do. They can't do their job to save their life.
Yeah, I mean, we just had a referee who was like, oh, Finn Balor gets suplexed by someone not in the match? Let's see where this goes.
And then he still got DQ'd later on. That was ridiculous. That was a bit. That was a bit much.
Yeah,
but
like, yeah, he called everyone on everything.
Yeah,
and it was so glorious. It was fantastic. I didn't even mean to do the Bobby Roode pun there. I'm sorry.
The best thing about that was too, and this kind of shows how. Well, I guess what a different world that we live in. But a friend of mine, that again, very, very, very peripheral wrestling fan, he was like, "Oh, that bit with Kurt Hawkins was so stupid with the tag rope." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, that's not a real rule." I was like, "Bro, it is. That's a rule." But WWE would never tell you that. So how would you know to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, beyond Seth Rollins and Daniel Bryan, I would say that my other favorite wrestler, as stereotypical as it is Becky Lynch.
No, I get it, man. She's on fire right now.
I mean, her character is, in terms of being like likable and badass, basically unparalleled at present. And she's been involved in some of my very favorite matches I've seen since starting to watch WWE at the start of 2018.
Well, absolutely, man. I mean, her resume, sort of, latter part of last year was ridiculous. Like Evolution and Survivor Series,
Evolution
TLC
was actually my favorite pay-per-view that I've seen so far.
Hell yeah, dude! It was a fantastic. Dude,
and that match is my favorite WWE match that I've yet seen.
Not surprised, man. It was great.
It was so good. Although NXT, whoo boy, they put on some good matches.
Well, they are. That's just it. It's not even a WWE product, is it? I don't even know what it is.
Well, they do. Triple H clearly subscribes to much more of a like ghetto style of booking, where it's like, I don't care if a story takes a year and a half. Like, I'm gonna do it right. I'm gonna like build and build and build and like let the pacing be what it ought to be, and I'm not gonna forget any details.
And doesn't sway when there's public outcry either.
Everything with Ciampa and Gargano.
Oh, man.
It has gone in such an unexpectedly dark and complicated direction, and the fact that it's still not over, like, I was sure it was going to be over by now, and I couldn't be more delighted to have been wrong.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. And yeah, I guess if we're talking about NXT at all, my other favorite present wrestler, 100%, is Aleister Black.
I can see that. I think Aleister Black, for someone, I think Aleister Black, talking about people that kind of capture the context of today, Aleister Black fits into that for me, because if you follow him on social media, he's a big advocate about mental health and things like that. He talks about it. He's very cool in the ring. He comes across like his own guy. I think he's very of the time in a good way. I think Aleister Black has...
I love the, like... He's from the Netherlands, right? And you can kind of tell because he has this like heavy kickboxing style to his wrestling that's very unique, like very brutal looking, fast and hard hitting, and the whole like Thelema and tarot and all these like occult things gimmick just really gets me. I love it. Also, it doesn't hurt that like I go and watch him do a workout video and he's listening to my favorite band.
Who's that?
Behemoth.
Oh, nice, dude. I like it, man. I didn't know he was into Behemoth. There you go. You learn something new every day.
Yeah. He was listening to Left Hand of God, kicking a punching bag, kicking a kickboxing bag. I was like, oh my god, that's so good.
But stuff like that helps, doesn't it? It makes you warm to them more because you feel like you got a connection to them then.
Yeah, and I am a little nervous about where his place is going to be coming up in NXT.
Who knows, man, right?
But everything they've done with him so far has been really, really good. And I must say, I don't is there ever an example of someone getting injured and them making more, lemonade out of those lemons?
Dude,
because that whole angle was so fantastic.
Oh, the whole thing, like, it was the perfect. Well, I saw Chris Sabre. No, not Chris. Who? It was a football player. It wasn't a wrestler at all. I can't remember now. A football player has just been ruled out for a long period of time. And I saw, and it just really sort of, it made sense to me. And I saw somebody else say, to him who'd also been injured, make sure you use this time to work on other aspects of your game. And it really made me think about wrestling, especially Aleister Black and other people that, okay, you can't perform and you can't do this and you can't do that, but you can go out and do so many other things. And that's exactly what Aleister Black did. Like, it was, if anything else, the WWE, NXT, Triple H, and him himself, again, it meant when he came back, he was an even bigger deal. And when does that ever happen?
I freaked out when he came back. And some of just the details in that story, like, Nikki Cross knew what happened, but she was just too out there and, like, bizarre for anyone to, like, nail her down enough to actually, like, have her tell them.
Yeah.
And Aleister Black comes back, he just demands that she tells him. And she does.
Yeah, because he's cool.
So good.
Because he's a badass. And that's what, he's not a geek, and that's why we like him, because he takes control. Yep. Oh, dear, I tell you, man. All right, look, so just because we're rounding up to my glorious 1 hour mark, I do want to talk about the Royal Rumble quickly. Nothing big. I just want to know. I give my predictions a lot, but it'd be really cool to hear your predictions, where you want to think it can go. Who do you want to win? Do you think Finn Balor has a chance against Brock Lesnar? Just a quick overview of what you'd like to see from the Royal Rumble and what you think will happen as well, because I understand that sometimes they can be different.
Sure. Let's see. What do we got? In terms of the men's Royal Rumble, I mean, it's a little boring, but it seems like everyone's saying it's either Seth or Drew, and I would lean towards that being true, and probably much more likely to be Seth. Even if you just want to, like, put on your Sherlock Holmes hat and be like, oh, look who is the middle, like, front and center person on the banner for Raw now, right? Stuff
it all counts. Marketing's massive, so.
And I feel like he's probably the best choice to be the guy right now.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like Drew McIntyre is a natural, like, person to challenge him first, because they seem to do really well in the ring together.
I think it's one of those situations where sometimes you can expect something and it sucks, but sometimes you can expect something and you get it and it's great. And I think this is one of those times.
It's the natural place to go.
Exactly, it just makes sense.
In my opinion, it's gonna make Raw kind of feel like it's on an even keel, and the belt is back, which will be fantastic.
Yeah, I agree.
So that pretty much, for me, cinches it. I'll be rooting for Seth. I'll be wearing my Seth Rollins shirt while we watch it.
Damn right, man. What about the women's Rumble?
In terms of the women's, I could see a lot of different things. Maybe an unpopular opinion. I would really like someone surprising to win this one. Simply
I've gone with it, man.
Because everyone in the world wants that triple threat with Ronda Rousey, Charlotte Flair, and Becky Lynch. And they can come up with any excuse they want to put that together because it's just the hottest thing. Like, they don't need to spend the Rumble on that. You know what I mean? Like, they could give someone else a material push.
Totally agree.
For their career through that. And since Ember Moon is my other favorite female wrestler, like, I, of course, would like her to win.
Dude, that's amazing. That's my prediction I made as well. The What Culture video is going live today. I went with Ember Moon. So we're in sync, man. We're absolutely in sync.
I would love it if she won, because I want her to challenge Asuka. I want her to finally get a win over Asuka after all those failed attempts.
Yeah.
Plus they just do good matches. So, like, it'd be another good match.
Dude, hell yeah, man.
You don't need the Rumble to get this triple threat. Everyone wants it anyway, and no matter how we are given it, we'll all be happy to see it, But I don't know. I think it's more likely that someone involved in that is going to win. But, I feel like poor Finn is getting fed to Brock, but at least they're making him look amazing in the process, and it seems like Brock is not going to be a lazy piece of shit and, like, actually do a good match with him. Yeah, there's something, a quick digression if you don't mind going a few extra minutes. There are two wrestlers, only two, that I don't like.
Do it, man. This is how we'll end. This is a good ending. I like this. This is good. Hit me.
Brock Lesnar and Nia Jax. Don't like them.
Right. Well, Nia Jax I can figure out
why.
Because
whether through gross incompetence or just outright malice, they hurt people. who they work with.
That's true. Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
one of the first things I saw, right, because it was Royal Rumble 2018, was Brock Lesnar intentionally punching Braun Strowman really, really hard in the side of the head.
That did
intentionally.
That did happen. You're right.
And fuck that guy. like this wrestling is dangerous and it requires cooperation and mutual respect. And like, I've got no time for somebody who's going to be a bully or is going to throw a tantrum at the cost of somebody else's health.
No, dude,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I've always said,
get him out of there.
I've always said that, you know, sometimes you get interviews with veterans and they say, oh, the locker room and the madness. And I'm like, you know what, man? I don't think I would have been able to survive in the locker room back then. I'd much rather locker room where everybody's friends, everybody's sort of, you know, there for the good of the company. That's just my vibe. That's just my vibe.
I mean, it's like if you're watching a movie or a TV show and then you find out that like, you know, like somebody was bullying someone on set or like, God forbid, like sexually assaulted someone. It's like, it doesn't matter how good their performance is. They got to be out of there.
Yeah, no, I do agree.
And this smacks of like the NFL or boxing or something where it's like, well, if you bring in enough money, you can just do whatever you want.
Oh, it 100% is that. It's 100% that. There's no question.
So, yeah, those are the only two I don't like. I appreciate everybody's work as long as they like, you know, have goodwill for the other people that they're working with.
I agree. I'm never into that kind of stuff. It's just not how I live my life. It's just not. I'm more each to their own and that kind of nonsense.
Sure.
So let me know how you think it's all going to go with Oscar, Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, and Charlotte, and then we can.
Gosh, they have, surprisingly, for something where everyone in the world wants one thing, they actually have a lot of good options that aren't necessarily exactly what we think. And I think that's just a real testament to how good and consistently good the SmackDown Women's division has been.
Oh yeah, I think it's the best thing in the company right now. I really do, in terms of not only the stories but also the outcome of the stories. And they both work, because sometimes you can have a good story but it has a crappy ending. At the moment, I kind of think like they're both doing well.
Well, I'm going to get back and beat my drum here a little bit, too. Vince McMahon pays less attention to SmackDown than Raw and less attention to women than men. And so SmackDown Women's division is going to have the least meddling and the most creative freedom.
I mean, I can't argue that. I can't argue. It certainly seems to be the case.
Gosh, I mean, I want the triple threat for sure. Like I said, you can do that without Charlotte or Becky winning the Rumble. I think it would be madness to take the belt off Asuka because the fans love her and she just got it. And she got it under sort of a little bit hinky circumstances with Ronda and stuff. So I would keep it on her. You can find another way to push Becky. Everyone in the world wants her to win every match forever, right? So, and God, Charlotte's so good. Like, just her level of athleticism and skill is just out of this world.
It's just I never understood when everyone's like, oh, it's just because she's Ric Flair's daughter. I was like, I don't think it is. I think it is, man. I think she's really talented. Like, I think she's really good.
Have you seen her do a wrestle, though?
Yeah, exactly. I never got it. Never got it at all.
No, so I think we are going to get the triple threat, whether through the Rumble or not. But God only knows who's going to win that. I mean, like, people will be very happy if Becky does. But you never know. You know, Charlotte's amazing. She also does undeniably have some cachet with the company and might get it for that reason. Or you might give it to Ronda because she's the biggest legitimate crossover star that they've got right now. But I think if they're smart, they'll let Becky win because you see Charlotte and Ronda getting booed when they're opposing her. You know what I mean? Like, anyone who's in her orbit is just the bad guy.
Yeah.
If Becky like raises an eyebrow at someone, they're the enemy of the people.
It's true. No,
like that's how like she is right now. So I feel like for the sake of all the people involved's careers, it would be nice for Becky to win.
I think it's all going to bleed into one. I said this earlier. I think whatever happens in Ronda's match will be affected by Charlotte in the Rumble, which will be affected by Becky Lynch versus Asuka.
Yeah, I feel like that's quite likely.
Yeah, but I'd like that. I think that'd be really, again, to tell that story and have it intertwined throughout a whole pay-per-view. Great storytelling, as long as you pull it off, which I think they will do. That's why. Just as a sort of a bullet point or a full stop. That's why I think the Royal Rumble's going to be great. I think the card is great. I think both Royal Rumbles have the potential to be really fun. And
the card is really stacked, with the exception of possibly the SmackDown tag team match. But like, I like a comedy match here and there. and this is gonna be dumb.
And at least there's a story to it, right? Like, at least there's a story.
Absolutely.
That's the main thing. It has a story, so I don't mind it at all. I think The Miz and Shane McMahon will win. I just think there's too much.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and I will say this: if that happens, anybody that moaned about Shane McMahon being the best in the world, you've got to stop moaning, because this is this is how it ended. And if you're happy about this, then that's where it started. This is where it ended. So it's as simple as that.
Yep.
Simple as that. Oh,
what a
dear.
strange road.
Dude, the weirdest. If you had told me this is the direction we were going to head, I would not have believed you. But no, I do.
Absolutely not.
I think the Rumble's going to be good. I'm excited about it, but we will see. We will see what they do. WWE surprised us before. Hopefully, they won't surprise us again. But we will figure it out. Well, look, Rob, dude, I want to thank you, man. That has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, and I knew something would come up. It always does. The Vince McMahon chat was, again, just wonderful, man. Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, and not to, I don't want to sound like I hate the dude.
No,
I think
not
he's
at all,
like
man.
the best in the world at like 499 of his 500 jobs.
No, absolutely, dude. Like, it's I think it's always good to have a critical discussion about anything. So yeah, like I think it's important to do that. And look, I enjoyed it, man. So that's all that matters. Dear. Okay, right. So Rob, do you want to give a shout out to all your stuff again? The film. What's the film called again?
Yeah, sure. The film is called The Nightmare Gallery. It's very, very late in post-production right now, so it will be out this year, 2019. The Nightmare Gallery, starring Amber Benson. It is a horror/dark fantasy kind of a film set in the modern day. It's not like wizards and elves and stuff, but it's a person dealing with some very mysterious, very creepy stuff. My podcast is the Orpheus Protocol, which is the long form campaign beta test of my tabletop role playing game, the Orpheus Protocol, that I edit and produce and add music and stuff to the point where it is more like a radio drama than listening to people play a game. Like, I have plenty of listeners who don't play tabletop games. They just listen for the story.
Brilliant.
That you can check out on iTunes or whatever podcatching app you prefer to listen to podcasts on. Those are my big main things: is the podcast, the game that's coming to Kickstarter later this year, and the movie that'll finally see the light of day later this year as well. Have you got any social media you want to throw out there? Sure thing. I am followable on Twitter at Lord of the Stith. My last name is Stith.
Great,
Stith. So it's like Smith, but with a T instead of an M. It's the Welsh spelling, a little bit weird, but Lord of the Stith. That's my personal Twitter, and then Orpheus Protocol at Orpheus Protocol is the show, and Twitter's what I'm most active on. It's my social media platform of choice at the moment. There you go. That's how you keep up with Rob. And honestly, dude, some great chats, some great opinions in that. That was really, I enjoyed that a lot. I thought that was awesome. As always, glad to pinch hit for you here. All of a sudden, like, hey, do you want to do a podcast like right now? It was, and again, don't forget, if you are on the list to come on, that could happen to you one day as well. So always keep an eye on that Patreon message. You never know where it's coming. Again, if you do want to support the podcast, it's just patreon.com/SimonMiller316. Thank you to everybody that did come aboard this week. Even if you can spare $1, it helps me know, and it's how I fund all of this and how I can definitely always ensure that I free up my day to get some time in, because we all know that's how the life and that's how the world works. I'm on Twitter at SimonMiller316, on Instagram at SimonMiller316. Also, this podcast will be on YouTube, youtube.com/The Miller Report Rules. Head over there, give it a subscribe, give us 5 stars, whatever you can, on whatever podcasting app you listen to. And of course, make sure you tune in next week, where we will go through the Royal Rumble and try and figure out whether it was good or whether it was bad. Rob, I'm going to let you sleep now, because you've been up for a very long time. But dude, thank you so much again. That was great. All right. And for everybody else, again, I will talk to you in a few days' time.